what he's going to write about. Before we can go into the next steps of the assignment, we'll need to introduce some more terms.
Now, as you start to consider the direction of your paper, there are a few things you need to meditate on, regardless of what type of writing you're doing.
First, your purpose or objective in writing. Second, your audience or who you're writing to. And third, the format of the paper. These three factors determine what you're going to say and how you're going to say it.
The form your thesis statement takes is based on these three factors. What do we mean by this? Well, let's get our hands a little dirty and take a closer look at each of these terms. We'll use Nathan's assignment to help clarify them.
Your purpose is why you're writing. You want to ask yourself, what do I plan to accomplish with this paper? You may want to describe an experiment on osmosis you've conducted, to argue your position on the origins of the French Revolution, or to research your family history and show people how fascinating, or dull, or weird, or raised by wolves your ancestors were.
Nathan's purpose in writing is to make an argument based on his observations of the place he's chosen.
Now, if his assignment had asked him to describe a personal experience about this particular environment, then he would use a story structure with descriptive words to show his reader what his place is like. If he'd been asked to do a research paper, then he'd need to spend time researching the history of that place and the people who lived there. In each of these instances, Nathan's methods and format would change because his purpose was different.
Closely related to one's purpose in writing is being aware of one's audience.
Your audience is whoever will be reading your piece of writing. Your purpose in writing is to manipulate your audience in some way. You might want to persuade them to your opinion.
Macaroni and cheese tastes better if you use swirls instead of elbows.
Or inform them about something.
Cheese is made from cows.
Or just entertain them.
It's important to remember that what you write about and how you write it depends upon who your audience is.
Think of a party you've been to lately. Now imagine writing one letter about going to that party to your best friend, and one letter as an assignment for a class. You would probably tell your friend what you actually thought about there and what happened. You would probably have some grammatical errors and a conversational tone throughout it. With your teacher, you would probably leave out certain details that happened, and you would have no grammatical errors. The whole letter would be much more formal.
So you can see how your audience has a huge effect on what you write and how you write it. Let's go back to Nathan. His audience is his professor.
I am so special. How would you like some special tutoring? How can I resist when you're so special?
Since his audience is his professor, he'll have to use a certain language and style appropriate to the academic environment. Let's go back to his free write about high school.
Notice the slang in several places, like watch lots of movies and lots of stuff there. Also, neither of these is a complete sentence, and Nathan would probably be counted off if he turned in a paper with sentence fragments like these.
Now is when it's really important to know your audience. Yes, you are writing for a college professor, but there are many different types of college professors.
Your teacher might be a nerd or some stodgy English teacher who hates any use of slang or first person. Other professors see the sole use of academic language as phony.
Bring it on!
I'm gonna dice you like a tomato, Grandma boy.
Ask yourself other questions about your audience. Am I going to be offending them with some of the language I choose? Will they know the terminology I'm using, or should I define it?
You see, you just got to know your professor and what he or she is looking for. If your professor is a stickler for grammar, then spend extra time on it. On the other hand, if your professor looks really closely at your organization, then be sure to spend more time on that part of your paper. And if you're not sure if you can use first person or slang or whatever,
then get up off your couch and go ask your professor. Don't just sit in your dorm room and stew.
Just remember that you're writing in order to manipulate your audience in some way. And to do that, you'll need to know your audience well. If you were to offend your audience, you just tick them off rather than persuade them to your opinion.
So the first two factors are purpose and audience. The third important factor you need to consider is the format of your paper.
The format of your paper is shaped by your assignment, as well as your purpose and audience. Like a floral designer does for flowers, the format of a paper describes how a paper should look and how it should be arranged. Watch me arrange these flowers.
Format includes stuff like the page length, the size of the margins, or the font size your paper should use.
I once wrote a paper for a different class in 38-point New Courier font. The paper was 5 pages long, but it only had 8 words.
Format also includes the style of documentation you should use and other types of materials that might be needed, such as charts or photos.
The format of Nathan's assignment is an essay. It doesn't require him to have charts or photos, but he could if he wanted to. He could maybe add a chart of the different groups in high school. Remember, even though your professor will always be your audience, you should look closely at the demands of the assignment. You should spend time throughout the creation of your paper and checking it over at the end to make sure it has the right format.
So we've talked briefly about purpose, audience, and format. These are 3 of the primary factors that will shape your paper. Remember, your purpose in writing is your objective. It's why you're writing or what you're trying to achieve. Audience is whoever will be reading your paper. Format refers to what your writing should look like. All 3 of these factors influence what you write about and how you write about it.
Now, Nathan needs to decide how to mesh his high school environment with his assignment. So he's going to do another free write based on the purpose, audience, and format of the assignment. The best way to do this is to go back to the assignment and circle, underline, and mark up places that refer to the purpose, audience, and format of your assignment. You do this because it would really bite to have written a bunch of stuff only to find out you misunderstood the assignment.
I once needed to write a paper on the structure of the American government. I wrote about cement and pillars and wood. It was very embarrassing.
We'll start with purpose. A good way to figure out the purpose of your assignment is to look for key words. What are key words?
Well, there's please and thank you. Oh, and pardon me.
Actually, these are words you can use as a guide for what the professor's looking for in the assignment. Some examples of keywords are criticize, prove, and summarize. These keywords shape the way you write about your topic.
For example, if Nathan was asked to summarize his high school environment, he would write very briefly, about a paragraph or so, the main points about high school.
So let's go back to Nathan's assignment where he's marked up his assignment in several places. We'll look at a couple of the keywords he circled, like define. Define means, well, you're defining something. You're setting the boundaries of or giving distinguishing characteristics to whatever's being defined.
Nathan's going to be writing about the distinguishing characteristics of different high school groups.
He's also circled describe. To describe something means you're giving a detailed account or painting a verbal picture of the thing being described. And let me tell you, that verbal family, they make a pretty picture.
So Nathan's going to be painting a verbal picture of the social groups in high school. He'll be using